It's so great to be here. I love speaking in spaces like this, actually. It's very rare that I get to preach from an actual pulpit as an atheist activist, so I feel really great about this. But I was looking around your delightful, very Unitarian collection of symbols up here, and I took some time to work out, thanks to the help I got, what the sort of labyrinthine squiggle is, and remember what the Buddhist wheel was and things like that. But I noticed, where is your happy human? There's no happy human banner. Well, I provided one for you, look at that. It fits perfectly exactly where it should be, right in the center of everything. Above all the others, exactly. I would say you can keep it, but I think it's going to go away if you turn off the projector. Oh, I love to dance. I was really getting into that. No, I am extremely excited to be here because there's nothing I love to do more than speak about humanism. And every time that I get to do that, I remember the first time I was invited to give a talk like this to an audience like yours. It was at the Concord area Humanists out in Concord, Massachusetts, and it was a beautiful, calm dusk, kind of an evening a little bit like this, with very sweet air, the sort of air you just want to breathe in so that you can feel the feeling of it in your lungs. And I was so excited, I gave my talk with a huge amount of enthusiasm. It was called Humanism, Creed of the 21st Century. You can tell I kind of like overblown titles, right? And when I was done, there was a question and answer session, just like it's going to be today, and someone put up their hand and I called on them, which I've learned, by the way, after doing many more of these speeches, is a cardinal error. You should never call on the first person who puts up their hand, especially if they're very, very enthusiastic. That's a tip you can have for free. But I called on this person, and she asked me, she said, "What is the point of all this? Why are we even here?" And I have to admit, I didn't have a very good answer to that question. And that's what I'd like to talk about today. Why are we here? Not the metaphysical question, you know, the big capital letter question, why are we here on this planet? Why do we exist? Although hopefully we'll get some hints about that along the way. I actually want to talk about the more pressing question, why are we all here in this room right now? Like, what are we doing here? It's a beautiful Monday evening in Los Angeles. I'm sure you've got many other things you could be doing, like, you know, going to dinner, hanging out with friends, going for a run. Someone else, not me, but someone might be doing that. You know, it could be warm in bed with your toes curled up and a nice cup of tea. That's probably what I would be doing right now. But instead, you're here in a Unitarian Universalist church space listening to a talk about humanism. Why? What are you doing here? That's the question I want to address today. Because we're not here, I think, because we support the same sports team, I think it's very unlikely, or do the same job. Not, I imagine, because we share exactly the same political beliefs. I bet there's a range of political views on many issues in this room. We're not here, I think, because we don't believe in God. I don't think we're here because of what we don't believe. I think that atheism is quite important. I think that often it's important to affirm that humanists don't believe in some of the more damaging and dangerous ideas that some human beings do believe in, many human beings. I think it's very important to stress that people who don't believe in God and who are not traditionally religious can be good people, good neighbours, good citizens, and can raise happy, fulfilled families, particularly in a culture which often seems to deny that truth. But that's not why we're here, I think. We're not here because of what we don't believe. I think we're here because of what we do believe. We're here, I like to say, to honour the promise of humanism. The promise that humanism holds for the future of our species, and the promise that we make as humanists to bring about that future. Now that's a very grand claim, right? What do I mean by that? What is the promise of humanism? Well, I think of humanism, I have to kind of act it out. I think of humanism as a life stance that rests on 2 feet. The back foot planted firmly in reality, reason. A commitment to the idea that our intellect, our collective intellect, thinking about the problems that face us, is one of the most important ways we're going to solve the problems that we face as a species.
as the back foot planted in reality and reason. The front foot, striding confidently forward, is compassion. The idea that every human being, like in that Unitarian statement that James read, every human being is fundamentally equal in dignity and moral worth. That every human being is important. And the third piece of humanism, the head looking forward to a brighter future for our species, hope. Simply the idea that we can, working together, using our reason, informed by our compassion, make a better world for us human beings to live in. And that's it. That's what I think humanism is. Now what I mean by these three things, I mean big things. And when I say reason, I don't just mean science. I don't just mean some sort of thin intellectualism. I mean all those capacities we human beings have of trying to make sense of what's going on in this extraordinarily confusing and complicated world in which we live. When I think about reason, I think about Carl Sagan, when he said the cosmos is full beyond measure of elegant truths, of exquisite interrelationships, of the awesome machinery of nature. I believe our future depends powerfully on how well we understand the cosmos in which we float, like a mote of dust in the morning sky. Our future as a species depends on reason. It depends on how well we understand this cosmos. And that's why humanists are committed to reason as the grounding foot of their worldview. But we're also committed to compassion. When I think of compassion, I think of Felix Adler, who founded the ethical culture movement. He was a religious innovator, really, an astonishing figure and a philosopher, and he founded what was essentially a series of non-theistic congregations in America that didn't believe in God, but believed in ethical living, and they were very successful for a time. And he said, the conception of worth, that each person is an end per se, is not a mere abstraction. Our interest in it is not merely academic. Every outcry against the oppression of some people by other people, or against what is morally hideous, is the affirmation of the principle that a human being as such is not to be violated. A human being is not to be handled as a tool, but is to be respected and revered. That big, powerful concept is what I mean when I think of compassion. The idea that every human being has dignity, every human being has moral worth and value, and that we must strive to respect that in everything we do as individuals and as a culture. That's compassion, the front foot of our worldview as humanists. And thirdly, hope. Now by hope, I don't mean a starry-eyed optimism. I don't mean the idea that everything's just going to be okay, because clearly that's not the case. All I mean is the concept that we can, working together, make things a little bit better. That human effort is not wasted. That this world is not coming to an end sometime soon and that we might as well throw up our hands. That we can work for the improvement of our species and the conditions in which we live. And Felix Adler, again, has a great quote about this. He said, an optimist is a person who sees only the lights in a picture, whereas a pessimist sees only the shadows. An idealist, however, is one who sees both the light and the shadows, but in addition sees something else. The possibility of changing the picture, of making the lights prevail over the shadows. That is what it means to hope in my vernacular, in my understanding of humanism. To believe that we can make the lights prevail over the shadows and make the world just a little bit brighter. Not that we're working towards some utopia, some promised heaven in the next life or even on this earth, but that we can just make things better. They don't have to be like they are. Now I realized when I was putting this talk together that these pillars, reason, compassion and hope, particularly the first two, these 2 feet of humanism, are responsible for every advance in human happiness and welfare that our species has ever accomplished. I want you to think about that for a second, because I think it's true. I mean, can anyone think of an example of a real achievement that our species has made to improve the welfare of human beings that has not come about because we've either expanded our reason and understood our situation better, come up with a new technology, a new idea, new thoughts that have shattered some social consensus that hold people down, or because we've expanded our compassion?
We've come to understand some people as fully human who we previously considered to be subhuman. I think that reason and compassion, guided by hope for the future, are at the very basis of all human progress. And what it means to be a humanist at root, I want to suggest to you, is to say that we want that sort of progress to continue. We want to keep taking steps for reason and steps for compassion, deepening our understanding of the world, expanding our circle of compassion to include more people. That's what it means to be a humanist, to be committed to human progress in that sense. When I think of that progress, I think of Robert Ingersoll, the great agnostic, the 19th century visionary of free thought in America. And he said, and this is where I get the title of my talk and of my blog too, we're laying the foundations of the grand temple of the future. Not the temple of all the gods, but of all the people, wherein with appropriate rites will be celebrated the religion of humanity. We're doing what little we can to hasten the coming of the day when society shall cease producing millionaires and mendicants, gorged indolence and famished industry, truth in rags and superstition robed and crowned. We're looking for the time when the useful shall be the honourable, and when reason, throned upon the world's brain, shall be the King of Kings and God of Gods. That's what Robert Ingersoll said, and that is what I believe humanists are working towards, that bright future. That's what it means to be a humanist, to want to keep taking steps for reason and compassion towards that sort of future. And I realized that this story, the story of the attempt to build that temple, that metaphorical temple of the future, is really the story of humankind, like the story of human progress in its most exalted attributes. Our journey as a species in fits and starts with major setbacks along the way, from being a primate with a big brain to being a primate with a big brain that spans the planet and remarkably gets along surprisingly well most of the time. And that's quite a journey for an animal such as us. And when I think about that great story, the great story of human progress, I think of people who have taken steps for each of these values, people who have taken steps for reason and taken steps for compassion. People like, and this is just a list of people who I particularly love, but I'm sure you've got your own. People like Norman Borlaug, who took a great step for reason when he invented dwarf wheat, right? And most people don't know who he is, right? He invented dwarf wheat, a sort of wheat that could grow much shorter and then will be less susceptible to being blown over by the wind, and therefore fed millions of people who otherwise would be dead of starvation today, through the magic of science, if we want to put it like that. People like Marie Curie and her pioneering work on radiation that led to modern oncology, and also led to her death, ultimately, from tumours induced by her experiments with that. She gave her life for the expansion of human reason. People like Galileo and the heliocentric model, who kick-started the scientific revolution, and his modern-day descendant, Neil deGrasse Tyson. I love those images that kind of have a similarity. There's something uncanny about that. Neil deGrasse Tyson, those two helping redefine our place in the cosmos. People like Darwin, discovering the fact of evolution, and Jane Goodall, who's studying some of our closest cousins in the animal kingdom, redefined our place in the family tree of life. All these people took a step for reason. They helped us understand our situation better, and therefore improved conditions for human beings on this planet. And when I think of people who've taken a step for compassion, and I should say I'm not just including humanists on this list, this is true, the story of humankind. This is religious people, non-religious people, anyone who's really made an advance for us, I include in this great history. People like the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu, I love this photo, they seem to be enjoying each other's company so much. And does anyone speak Burmese in the audience? Fantastic! So you won't know when I totally mispronounced this name, but I've practiced it, so I'm going to try. So people like Aung San Suu Kyi. I'm going to say it again, Aung San Suu Kyi. It took so long to learn that, and now I'm going to get an email saying it's wrong, probably. Who's an extraordinary activist for human rights in Burma. People like Nelson Mandela. People like Eleanor Roosevelt, who was an ethical culture member herself. She was very close to the New York Society for Ethical Culture, and was basically a humanist, by my understanding. People like Martin Luther King, who took more steps for compassion in his short life than most people take in a long one. Gandhi, frail after one of his hunger strikes. Harvey Milk, always smiling, even in the face of oppression. I just came back from something of a pilgrimage in San Francisco to the Castro, and I went to his old camera store and the Castro theater to see a film and stuff. I still get so full of emotion when I'm around that area. It's really one of those hubs of human progress. I'm going totally off script now. It's just bad for the rest of the talk. Anyway, it was a big deal for me whenever I go there. These sorts of people, they gave their lives to expand the circle of our compassion, reaching for Adler's ideal, the ideal that every human being is full in dignity and moral worth. And humanists, people who self-identify as humanists, have been doing this for many decades, often decades ahead of others in their embracing of new ideas which advance our reason and new moral precepts which expand our compassion. Humanists are often at the advance guard of social change in these areas. We should be really proud of that. We should be proud of this history and this story. And this story is not just a Western history. It's not just a story of people from America and the United Kingdom, although a lot of them do come from the United Kingdom. I might be a little biased. No, it's truly a global story of human progress. Representatives of all peoples and at all times, even the darkest of times, have taken a step for reason and compassion in human history. I think of places like ancient China and the scientific revolution that swept through the Song dynasty, which saw the development of the magnetic compass and some of the earliest examples of archaeology. The scholars of ancient India who invented the complete decimal number system and the use of zero as a number. Well, we wouldn't get very far without that today. And the salvation and translation of the works of Aristotle, works which would become central to Christian ethics and therefore modern ethics today, and the development of techniques like trigonometry during the Islamic Golden Age. And I think it's particularly important at a time of great Islamophobia in much of the world to remember that Islam has its tradition of progress too. And what it means to be a humanist, I want to suggest, is to say that we stand with these people. And we stand with this tradition of human progress. We want to push our species towards even deeper reason and even broader compassion, always with a hopeful eye to a future which is better than today. That's what it means to be a humanist to me. And I believe that makes humanism unique. I think that no other worldview can claim, no philosophical or political doctrine, no religion, not even, to a certain extent, our close cousins, the Unitarian Universalists, although there's a lot of humanistic thinking in their statement of beliefs. But I don't think that they can claim that their core values alone are those which underpin all of human progress. Humanism just picks the very finest things of our species and holds them up alone, without any theistic baggage, any supernaturalism, just the best things about being a human being, and says that's what we should believe in, that's what we should strive for. And I believe that the promise humanism holds for the world is therefore unique. I think a more humanistic world would be a profoundly better world. A world which was truly informed by these values would be way better than the one we live in today. But that leads me to my kind of downer point, which is that if you look around the world in which we live, we haven't built this temple of the future. We haven't got there yet. We're not even remotely there. We don't live in a world which respects reason uniformly, or even seems sometimes very often. We don't live in a world that holds precious the life and dignity of every human being. You know, if we look around the world in which we live, we see millions of people dying of starvation in a global situation of plenty. We see people dying of wars and preventable diseases. Millions more people who live in countries which deny them basic freedoms, the freedom to go to school, to have a say, to cast a vote, to have a thought. Millions of people denied those basic freedoms. Looking closer to home, in this country, 1 in 5 children live below the federal poverty level. That was the last time I checked, maybe more now. In this country, in the United States, the most wealthy country in the world, too little food on their table, too many holes in their clothes when they go to school in the morning. just minutes from where we are today, and I know that because I was here last year doing service work on the streets of Los Angeles and on Venice Beach. There are tons of people, including many, many young people, especially a disproportionate number of LGBTQ young people, who make the streets their home. A cold bench as a mattress, their belongings in plastic bags, meager hopes scrawled on a torn piece of cardboard, and this in the wealthiest and most powerful nation the world has ever known. And we accept it. We haven't built the temple of the future. We're dealing with unprecedented challenges as a species like climate change. The fact that we may already have destroyed the planet for our descendants. For our children and our grandchildren may be facing a situation where they can't visit Venice Beach because it's going to be underwater. That's quite a real possibility that we have to face as a species. And imagine the social unrest that's going to be caused when people don't have enough fresh water to drink, they don't have enough food because they can't harvest the crops. It's going to lead to enormous social problems, huge numbers of refugees, war. It's going to be disastrous. We could be looking at the last few generations of human habitation on this planet at this rate. We really face unprecedented levels of threat. Political challenges, like the consistent attack on reproductive rights in this country, which is weird to many of your sort of cousins over the pond in Europe, that there's still even discussion over the basic right to choose when you have a child. Things like the battle over LGBTQ rights. Like, where the hell can I get married? In the land of the free and the home of the brave, right? Well, who is preventing the pursuit of my happiness in the 21st century, in 2013? It's an embarrassment. The attempts by the right to suppress the votes of minorities and poor people by inventing these ridiculous voter registration laws for simple purpose of helping them win elections. We haven't built the temple of the future. And I want to suggest that humanists in general, maybe not the humanists in this audience, because, hey, here you are, but humanists in general, people who support these values, do too little to build it. We do too little. Putnam and Campbell, in that really amazing book, American Grace, has anyone read that book? It's really fantastic. It's very big, but it's worth reading. It's a sociological analysis of the nature of religion in the United States and what effects it has on social culture. And basically they found that religious individuals were, as it says up there, the evidence we review suggests that religiously observant Americans are more civic and in some respects simply nicer. And what does this mean? What did they actually find? They found that religious Americans volunteer more of their time to secular and religious causes. They give more of their money, both to secular and religious causes. That means if you factor out the religious giving, they're still giving more money to secular charities than people who are not religious. They're more engaged in politics. They're more likely to vote. They're more likely to run for office. They're more likely to volunteer on a campaign. They're just more generally engaged. Indeed, they suggest that religion somehow produces a moral energy that their secular counterparts lack. An energy to get involved in the culture, to live their values, that somehow non-religious people don't have. And so that leaves us with a problem, because we have a country that's becoming more and more secular. The fastest growing religious population in America is none. It's no religion. Depending on whose polls you read, some 20 to 33% of the American population can be considered non-religious now. And yet, these people are less involved in their communities, less involved in politics, giving less money than their religious counterparts, by a significant margin. Put all that together, and they say it's about, religious Americans are about twice as engaged in society as secular Americans. And so we face a real pressing problem if we want humanism to be a movement that's going to change the world, if we want to build that temple, if we want to keep stepping forward with reason and compassion. And that problem is how to change our relative apathy into energy. That was cheesy, wasn't it? I like that slide. It was really cheesy. I accept it. I accept it. Mea culpa. Well, how do we do that? Well, this is where we come to the question that I posed at the beginning of my talk. Why are we here today? Because it turns out that what Putnam and Campbell found was that it was not faith or religiosity that spurred greater participation in civic society. It was not the intensity of someone's belief in God. Indeed, they found that if you hold that constant, hold other factors constant and just vary intensity of belief in God, it doesn't make any difference at all. A religiously zealous hermit was no more engaged than an atheist hermit. But what they found was that participation spurs, attendance spurs participation. They found that it was engagement in a moral community, basically a congregation, that was the factor that they think is causal in producing these civic gains. I.e., it's not God that makes a difference, it's going to God's house. So an atheist who, for whatever reason, maybe they have a spouse who drags them along to church, maybe some of you have been in that situation before, right? An atheist who goes to a congregational meeting as regularly as a devoutly religious person shows exactly the same levels of civic engagement on average than the religious person shows. And the devoutly religious hermit does not show the same levels of religious engagement. And so what they speculate in that book, and I really almost dropped the book and fell out of bed when I read this, was, and that's hard to do, is that close, morally intense, but non-religious social networks could have a similarly powerful effect on civic engagement. But, they said, there are too few of them, and they can't study the effects of so few communities like that. Well, that to me sounds like a challenge. That sounds like why we're here today. That sounds like how we're going to build that temple of the future. If we want to have an impact with our values on the culture, as big as the religious right has traditionally had on this culture, which has been very significant over the last few decades, one of the first things we need to do is build moral communities of our own. We need to find close, morally intense, but non-religious social networks which seek explicitly to promote and spread humanist values, to engage the people who come together in spaces like that in living their values out in life, so that humanism becomes more than a philosophy, like more than something that's in a book, so that you can tell who's a humanist by the decisions that they make, by how they spend their money, by how they spend their time. That's what humanism really should be. And that's why communities like this one are so very important, because this is the start of exactly that movement. And that's why I do what I do. That's why I fly all over the country and get completely exhausted to talk to groups like yours, because this, I believe, is how we build our movement. Well, we have historic precedent for this. Ethical culture, which I was talking about earlier, that Felix Adler founded, was exactly this. It was non-theistic congregations. In the 19th century, he decided he was done with God, right? But he still wanted the congregation. He felt there was something extraordinarily important there. And what he said was astonishingly prescient, given the state of sociological knowledge at the time and how well founded it's turned out to be now in our own day. He said, how do we encourage people to do good, there being no authority of creed or book to lean upon? The answer is, we put them in the midst of crowds. Basically, he saw that the community was the driving force for people's social engagement. And he said that we need to keep that community even if we ditch God, right? Just throw that baby, let's put the baby up for adoption and keep the bath water, because it's really actually good for you. It's got lots of nutrient oil. I'm not going to go too far with that metaphor because it gets gross. I'll just leave that right there. And he really did it. He built congregations like this all over America. This is the house that Adler built in New York City, the first ethical culture society. It is, as you can see, it's quite big. Anyone know New York City well? I know Greg does. Yeah, some people know New York City. So the street that is running, oh, I've got a laser beam. I always forget my laser beam. I'm a huge Star Trek fan, and I always forget I have a phaser. Literally, that is technological progress. That's reason for your next. So this street here is Central Park West. So you will be sitting in Central Park and looking straight across the street to this 5-story building. This orange bit is the school he founded, so it's a whole city block. The whole thing is theirs. There's just, I can't find a photo of the whole building because it's too big. And inside is a 750-seater auditorium that he used to fill every Sunday with speeches about science and ethics from a completely non-theistic standpoint in New York City. We could do that again, ladies and gentlemen. I believe we could do that again. I believe that I could come back in 5 years and 10 years to this very place, and instead of a Unitarian church, or maybe next to it, because I don't want to suggest we knock it down, there will be a massive humanist community center for people like us, filled with hundreds of people committed to the highest of human values, willing to do something about it. And that is the vision that we work towards at the Humanist Community Project. That's why it exists. We want to promote the development of those sorts of communities all around this country because we think that that's the first step to having a greater impact on the culture with our values. Now, I suspect, maybe not in this audience, but in many audiences I speak to, which are very hardcore about their atheism, people are getting really concerned at this point. They start shuffling and squirming in their seat and looking at me funny. Because they're very worried about the idea of turning atheism into a religion, right? And maybe some people have that worry here today. So I want to just allay some of your fears a little bit, okay? We're not going to have a Pope Dawkins, right? This is not going to happen. There's going to be no Pope Dawkins. We're not going to get up on a Sunday and kneel to Richard Dawkins, you know. I wouldn't mind kneeling to Sam Harris, but that's for an entirely different set of reasons. Don't explain that joke to the kids. I bet that's never been said in the Unitarian Church. See, that's why you should invite me more. It's a little more fun when I'm around. Okay, we're not going to have this. Like Greg Epstein, my boss, is not trying to become the Pope of humanism. Right? We're not going to have that. You're not going to be forced to go if you don't want to go. I often get asked, you know, well, I don't want to go to a humanist community. I like my atheist meetings, fine. And I say, that's fine, you don't have to go. And they say, yeah, but I don't want to. And I say, yes, you don't have to go. Somehow people don't get this idea. No one's going to force you to go. You won't become a zombie. I promise. It's not going to take all your critical thinking skills and just dash them at the door. You're not going to come in the door and put on a robe and join a cult. No, what I'm talking about are communities for people like us who want to make a difference in the world, but just don't believe in God. There's nothing inherently religious about a congregation. And I think we need to start congregating more to making a big difference. I want you to imagine it. Like, imagine what it would be like in every city, in every town, a humanist center. A place to discuss the latest development in science while your children are off at rational Sunday school learning about how to be skeptical and ask difficult questions and not to obey authority. That might be difficult when you get them home, right? But it's ultimately what we want. We don't want kids who don't question things. A place where you can go to find succor in times of difficulty, when you've lost your job, or when your parents are passing away, or when you're ill. People who share your values, who won't pray for you, who won't give you a whole bunch of mumbo-jumbo bullshit about the, I'm sorry to deeply committed Unitarians in the audience, but the interconnected web of being, whatever that is, right? None of that stuff, just honest, open discussion of the highest human values and a hub for activism around those values. That's what we're looking to create. That's the first thing I think we need to do as a movement to build this temple of the future. The second is to foster moral leadership. And I have a picture of Felix Adler here. He was a weird-looking dude. But he was he kind of looks a bit like an alien, I always think. He was really short too, but I feel good about that. But he was a real moral leader. He had a lot to say about the pressing social issues of our day. And I think humanists need to speak out a little louder on those issues. You know, secularism and the separation of church and state is important, but it's not the only thing that we care about. At least it's not the only thing that I care about. Now, I care about the fact that there are kids who don't have enough food to eat, and there are kids who go to terrible schools which are violent but they can't guarantee their safety, and there are homeless kids in droves on the streets because their kids have thrown them out, their parents have thrown them out for being gay. Like, I care about those issues, sometimes a little more than I care about the separation of church and state. I know that's heresy to some atheist activists. But humanists need to speak up on all these issues and foster moral leaders who are willing to do that and promote them. Adler said that the hero is one who kindles a great light in the world, who sets up blazing torches in the dark streets of life for people to see by. He said the saint is the one who walks through the dark places of the world, themselves a light. We need heroes and we need saints now like we've never needed them. The human species faces these unprecedented threats like climate change, the threat of a runaway global economy which seems not accountable to anybody, the enormous difficulty of stemming warfare, the nuclear proliferation that could just end all life on this planet in an instant is a horrific notion. We face We face challenges that the human species has never faced, that a primate like us is just not generally equipped to deal with. And we need heroes and saints to do that, and it could be you. Actually, I don't want it to be you. I'm calling on you. Because we need people to stand up to build these sorts of communities to say a better world is possible, and we're the ones to make it. So we need you to be moral leaders. I had a slide in here that had Sagan pointing out, and it says, we need you, but it seems to have gone, so I'm sorry about that. It's freaking awesome. I'll try and find it later. You're desperately needed. You know, people of faith often say they have a calling. And I believe that humanists have a calling too. Not a calling from the heavens, for sure, but from this world. Because every superstition which keeps people enslaved is a call to our reason. Every cry of a hopeless child is a call to our compassion. Every tortured creed of human failure and inadequacy is a call to us to hope. In these ways, we humanists are called. We all call to build that temple of the future. That temple with justice its foundation, peace and goodwill its columns. That temple of all the people, in which we all are robed in compassion and crowned with reason. A temple with its doors open to all humankind, a torch of progress burning in every sconce, the light of hope filling the world. This is our calling. This is why we're here today. This is the promise of humanism. Ingersoll had a vision of it. Adler showed us we could do it. And now is the time for us to build it. Thank you. I'm done. So the only thing I have to say is I never do this, because I forget mainly. But you can read what I write on the web. Templeofthefuture.net is my blog, and no one reads it. You can read what I write. I write a blog. No one reads it. I have like 3 readers. I love them very much. But you can read what I write. You can follow me on Twitter at JFL Croft. You can go to harvardhumanist.org and find out what we're doing at Harvard. So please stay in touch, because this is genuinely a project that I intend to dedicate my life to, and I hopefully will have a lot of life to go. I would love to take questions now, but I warn you, I take a lot of time to answer questions. I answer them in detail. So if you want to get a question in, ask it quickly, because otherwise there won't be any time. I know I'm going to break my rule. Okay, take it away, Andy. Oh my! Test 1, 2. Oh wow, it even works.
I just wondered what's happened to that property that Felix Adler developed on Central Park West.
We still have it. That property, the school has been spun off a little bit. The orange part of the building, which is the school he founded, he was very much into public education. He started the first free kindergartens in New York, as well as the visiting nurse service. Ethical culture has been quite significant in the history of New York, at least. So this building, which is the question, what's happened to it? It's still there. The Ethical Society of New York still meets there. But I have to say, it doesn't meet in this auditorium. There are too few people. They meet in a smaller room, while a fundamentalist Korean church meets in the auditorium. And this, actually, that fact, was the first time I stepped into that auditorium and looked out at the beautiful empty seats. These are all dark hardwood seats with beautiful plush, purple velvet cushions. It's a really glorious place. And I walked out onto that stage, and I decided that that was not acceptable to me. And that was the day I decided to train as an ethical culture leader. So I'm actually at the moment in process of training to become a leader of an ethical culture society. They have professional leaders like clergy. They are clergy actually, legally. And I'm in the process of training that because I want to fill that room. I want that, if we lose that building, which is potentially the biggest hub of humanist thought in the whole world, is an extraordinarily significant historical monument to our ideals. If we lose it, we'll never get it back. So it's still in use. I think the situation is long-term precarious for it, but I would really love to speak to a full hall there. I would consider.
What street is it on?
It's on 63rd and Central Park West. It is serious prime real estate. It is amazing to think about what you can do in that space. And they do use it very well. I mean, I've been to a lot of meetings there, and I've really enjoyed them. It's just a matter of updating the offering a little to a new generation. So, It's a great question. It's still there, and I really would love it to be there in 100 years. Yes, at the front.
How many humanists are there in the world?
I have no clue. That's an extraordinarily difficult question to answer, because you have to decide, well, do we mean self-identified humanists? People would say, if you ask them about their beliefs, I'm a humanist.
Yeah, that's what I would say.
Okay, if you mean that, very few. In the American Grace book, they actually did, part of it was a big survey, that book. And if you get that book, by the way, I recommend the paperback version because it has a new chapter about non-religious people that wasn't in the first version. It also has a quote from my review in the front, which is the first time that ever happened to me. I was so excited. So in that book, they did a kind of survey of American religious belief. It was big. They talked to a lot of people in a lot of depth. And they said at one point in the book that the number of self-identified atheists and humanists was so minute that they couldn't make any statistical analysis of it, and they said, I think, that it was 3. Not 3% of their sample, 3 people. 3 people in their sample identified as atheists and humanists. So there's a big self-identification problem. If you broaden out the search to people who broadly live their lives according to humanist values, then that's a lot. If you say non-religious people who try and be decent, that's a lot. Like Greg Epstein's book says what 1 billion non-religious people do believe. Right? It could be 1 billion people who are broadly humanist in that way. As you can probably tell, I'm angling for a little bit more intense than that. I'm angling for some sort of commitment on behalf of humanists. And there are very few people, I think, who really take it that seriously. But I have to say too, and this is not your question, but it kind of sparks this thought, I'm not necessarily wedded to the word. I'm wedded to the values. Reason, compassion, hope, I think are the best human values that you can come up with. I think no one else has done better. But if humanism isn't the word to convey those to people, I'm flexible. I'm going to do what works, because I think the spreading of the values is more important than the existence of the movement which is called humanism. And now I'm going to get angry letters from the American Humanist Association. No, not really. I love them. I love them very much. Hi, Roy. Sorry, there was someone at the front, and then there.
Actually, you just were starting to touch on it right now.
Right.
It has to do with the linguistics. You were talking about for this to be a moral movement, you know,
yes.
A moral, like for me personally, I hear the word moral and I think of moral minority, to my moral minority, sorry, yeah. And
well, they were a minority, you're right. But, that was great branding.
Well, yeah. But, so it makes it make me think of what religious
right.
people try to claim. So, I mean, for me, it's like when you were saying values, something like that resonated with me. And then you said the word saint, that we need saints. So I'm sure you get this.
Yeah. So, yes, I do. I think you got it exactly right.
Have you done any actual research and polls and stuff like that to find out what people do prefer? Because a lot of times
right.
working with one group and we use atheists, and most of the people in the group, since it was a political party, would say, no, we need to go with secular, and we were
right.
constantly back and forth on this. Some people like atheists because interface, this is who we are. Secular resonates with more people because then we bring in more liberal Christians, and so there was a lot of conflict.
Right,
with
I can imagine.
And linguistics is always so important.
Indeed. Yeah. So I do think a lot about that question. The question is basically what language you use to promote these ideas: atheist, secular, agnostic, atheist. Wait, I said that, humanist, things like that. And you're totally right about 2 things that you said, I think. Firstly, that our movement is really obsessed with language to an unhealthy degree. The first American Humanist Association conference that I attended, I literally saw someone interrupt a speaker while they were speaking to complain that they had capitalized the H in humanist. That was worthy of an interruption. When I spoke at the Humanist Society of Greater Phoenix, which is an amazing society, they've got their own building, they've really gone for it there, there was a ton of people, they were just having so much fun. Someone told me that, I talked a bit about language in my talk, and someone told me that they, when they had first described the idea of the humanist center that they wanted to build, they had described it as a sanctuary. And one member of the group had been so offended by the use of the term sanctuary that they never returned. I have less and less sympathy with this as it goes along. I have to say, I just feel that's so irrational, that language is a tool that we have to be able to use in all its fullness to express what we mean. And if there are certain shibboleths in our community, thou shalt not say this word, otherwise we're going to sort of excommunicate you, or it's going to be a big problem, we're going to have a real trouble communicating to a wide audience. At the same time, you're exactly right. It is a matter of fact that in our community there are many terms that raise hackles. Yes, I get it all the time. People hate the fact that I use religious terminology and talk about, like saint, temple of the future. People hate the fact that I call my blog Temple of the Future. The thing, I'm trying to help people get over that by taking back language, and this goes to the first part of your question. Over the last year, when you hear the words morals, you think of the moral majority and the religious right. They did that to you, right? They did it on purpose. They set teams of people with very strict rules about what language to be used to colonize the language of values in this country, and they've been remarkably successful in that. And the only way we can win in the battlefield of culture is take the language back. We need to stop talking about family values, because I have a family and I have values, and I'm not going to be afraid of talking about them because of the Family Research Council or some other right-wing abomination. Now, we really need to find a way to become comfortable talking about our deepest values. Susan Jacoby, who I think is one of the greatest writers around in the free thought movement, in her book Free Thinkers, she says, I'm going to try to remember the full quote, she says basically that secularists need to find a way to convey the passions of their worldview in the way that Ingersoll once did. We have she said that people believe that atheists are bloodless, professorial purveyors of abstract scientific principles that have no relationship to real human lives. And we've allowed ourselves to be put in that box. We've allowed the right in this country to take over the most important values words. Family, country, right, loyal, patriotism, all the resonant, kind of gutsy moral language is owned by the right in this country. It's not the case everywhere. And we need a systemic communications campaign to take it back. And that's why I use this language in the speeches, because I want it back. Thank you very much. Mine is the language of Shakespeare. It's not going to be colonized by the religious right in this country and their small minds. Anyway, excuse me. I'm ranting a little bit. Can I get a Darwin? I stole that from Jerry DeWitt. He's a great figure. You should have him. He's very good. So thank you. That was a really good question. Did I answer it?
Yes, you did. It's kind
right.
of along the lines of the fact I agree with you. I do not like when something is taken over by something else. I mean, they actually do a really, really good job because they steal our language now. They love the word reason.
Yeah.
Now they're trying to take reason and act as if they are the reasonable ones. So, yeah, that bothers me.
Right, and I think that speaks to a really important point, which is, and this is something the humanist movement, the big capital N movement, the movement organizations really have to realize is we actually have to compete. Like, we actually have to try and produce cultural products that are as compelling as the ones that our cultural opponents are producing. The right in this country spends a lot of money and energy organizing itself and promoting its message through television shows, through plays and radio programs and things like that. The progressive side of American politics has very little to counter that often, and we need to get really good at it. And part of the reason is they've got all these communities where they can draw support from. And I really want to have the same. I want to say, you know, I represent a community of X hundred, X thousand, tens of thousands of people. I'm thinking secular Saddleback, right? And I want to be able to galvanize that community to support our values, and that means we need to compete. We need to really compete in the culture. We're not just going to win by sitting back or writing academic books and things like that. We really need to compete at people's level. And so, anyway, I should probably take another question. I'm sorry. You had a question there, and then I see there's people in the microphones.
I know that Unitarian Universalism has evolved from a Protestant denomination, but I don't really see, and having come to it from a 1,000,000% Jewish family, I don't see what the difference is. The Unitarian movement, I mean, I wish everybody could get together, but I don't see that there's any, at this point in history, that there's any very much religious, deistic effects that are practiced here. I mean, I would have been long gone if I thought any of that stuff that I ran away from. So it seems like the differentiation when you were saying
connected web of being.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds, when you separate it, it sounds silly, but it really is the same idea.
Right, it is. I mean, I think you're fair to point that out. But one of the fascinating historical things about humanism in America is the influence of Unitarian Universalism, as James said. Where is he? There you are. Unitarian Universalism historically became a form of humanism. I like to think of people coming to humanism from different angles, lots of different angles actually, but two of the main ones I think, particularly in America, are you get to liberal religion, like particularly liberal Christianity, and you kind of start problematizing the question of God more and more and more until it gets vaguer and vaguer and more metaphorical, and until it kind of finally just evaporates, and you're sort of a humanist, and you've just sort of got there that way. Or you start at a hardcore atheism, and you add on ethical principles. That's why a lot of the younger people come into the movement. They're like, I'm not religious, and I don't like all that stuff religion is doing to my country and my culture, so I'm going to reject all that. Oh, what do I stand for now? And they start to add on stuff. And they kind of meet in the middle. But it's not a nice mesh right now, because the people who come out of the religious traditions into a sort of Unitarianish humanism, and the people who come out of the sort of atheism movement, they have different vernacular and different idioms, and they have a kind of different way of being in the world. They don't jive together. They can't really dance. There's very little good dancing in the humanist movement as a whole, actually. It creates certain tensions. But yeah, there's so much commonality there. But the reason why I think this is something different to Unitarian Universalism, like fundamentally different, is that, and this is difficult because language is difficult, but it's not coming out of a religious tradition. It's not kind of basically Christian, but just not really anymore. This space, the whole layout of this space, even with the banners on the wall, is like a Christian congregation. This is not how people worship in many other parts of the world. You know, with pews and people sitting in rows like this. The whole, with the organ, like that's all Christian. And so it has the trappings of its Christian ancestry very much on the surface of it. And many people who walk into a space like this think, oh, it's a Christian church, and I've left that behind. I feel like humanity is ready for something entirely new, for a new way of being together that doesn't necessarily reference old religious traditions. Not that we need to do away with them, but that it just doesn't seem to speak to me as a millennial, just about on the cusp of millennial generation. I want something that has more of the Sagan and the Star Trek about it than the Reinhold Niebuhr and people like that. It's just, it doesn't resonate with me. It doesn't make my soul go. And I don't know exactly what would, but it's not this. I've been to a lot of Unitarian congregations and I don't feel at home there. I want something different. And I can't really explain it any better than that. But that doesn't mean it has to be for everyone. I mean, actually, one of the slides I should add to my sort of, this is how moral communities are not going to kind of make you into a zombie section, is that there's going to be different types of these sorts of communities. You want to be secular, humanistic Jew? Fine. You want to be humanistic Mormon, which is a thing that's starting now? Fine. If there's some humanistic form of Islam that is going to be good for you, that's good. If you want the Unitarian Universalism, great. We want to support all of those efforts, because the values are what important, not the sort of trappings. But for me, I want something different. I genuinely want the temple of the future. And I don't know what it will look like, but it doesn't quite look like Unitarian Universalism to me. It kind of screams 60s. I'm sorry. There's a reason why there's a very strong correlation between more wealthy nations and higher levels of secularism and less. And that's partly because people's living conditions make a huge difference as to what they turn to in times of trouble. And I also think, though, that while we're doing that process, humanist communities like this could be so valuable in many parts of the world that do not look like America. There are so many places in the world that where the go-to response to many social problems is basically riddled with superstition and nonsense that just makes it worse. Like one of my very great friends, a humanist who I really respect, A.J. Kumar, who's a student at Harvard and was the president of our graduate student group, he spent some time with the Peace Corps. And he described some of the things he saw when he was working with the Peace Corps in various parts of the world, where in response to things like unwanted pregnancies or rape or things like that, people would do the most appalling things to people because they believed in some superstition that would make it better. And it doesn't. People today are taking, the reason why I have an AIDS slide up there, is people today take remedies that are prescribed essentially by modern day witch doctors because they think it's going to cure them of AIDS, and then they go on to have unprotected sex with a bunch of people, thanks to the Catholic Church partly saying don't wear a condom. And the whole situation is made so much worse by the lack of a real humanist presence. And if there were centres there, like there are centres somewhere, places in India, there's actually a strong Indian atheist movement that was active even when Gandhi was around, for which Gandhi came to have quite significant respect, particularly because they really advocated for the plight of the untouchables, which even Gandhi didn't do in much of his time. So it was kind of a remarkable thing. But if there were real humanist communities and movements in many countries around the world, they could have such a profound effect on people's lives. So yeah, let's try and raise all people out of poverty, and while we're doing that, let's try and spread humanist values a bit in places across the world. That's why I'm so excited for projects like the Pathfinder project, which Connor's putting together like a total boss. I think we should give you a round of applause for that, because it's totally sweet. If you haven't heard about it, you should totally hear about it, because it's totally awesome. Which is, as far as I'm saying, send humanists all around the world to learn about these issues, so that we know where we can be of service. And yeah, so as I say, I answer questions in great length. My apologies if people are still waiting. Ian, did you want to?
It's okay. So in thinking about this building the temple of the future, and you were referencing the book in which it talked about people being civically engaged because they're in congregations.
Right.
Well, now when you look at the millennials,
yes,
where the number is, what, 25, 30, 35%.
Yes, very high.
But they are often referred to as apatheists.
Right.
You may notice, you don't know them, but you may notice that my children are not here tonight. I know.
That's a failure of parenting of great magnitude.
My kids look at me and go, why do you spend so much time and energy thinking about these kinds of things, Dad? This is not important. We all know we don't believe in God. Let's move on with it. So what do we do to attract the next generation to help us build this temple of the future? What are we going to offer them other than the trappings that they see here in the United Church where Mom and Dad go every Sunday?
Well, firstly, I mean, you asked a great question. This is so close to my heart. Firstly, don't talk about God. Like, I really didn't talk about God. I don't have any time for that question anymore. Okay, God doesn't exist. I'm done with that. Okay? I'm totally convinced of it. I'm open to persuasion, but I've not heard a remotely convincing argument. The arguments are usually worse when you actually read them than you imagine they might be. They're really bad. But that, to many millennials who are interested in potentially doing good in the world, is a done deal. That is not an interesting question anymore. And a lot of the things that the current humanist movement promotes are still focused on, and I would even say fixated on, the question of God's existence. Right? It's almost like, I get in such trouble for saying things like this, but hey, what do I get? It's almost like we're more religious than religious people. Sometimes I go to these conferences and I think, don't you have anything to talk about except God? You don't think God exists. So why do you spend all your time talking about God? It makes me mad. It makes me crazy. So we have to move on. We can have a time to talk about that, but we have to get over it. And so what we found at Harvard is that once we started talking about a broader range of issues, and once we started doing different sorts of things, we brought in new people. We just started talking about different things. We started talking about love and relationships. We started talking about soccer in times of crisis. We started doing service projects like cleaning up a park, and we started having picnics for people and their kids. We basically, what I think the realization we came to, at least the realization I came to that I hope I had some role in kind of pushing, promoting in that community, is that humanism is not about God. It is about human beings. And it's about the most significant aspects of being a human being and about our highest values. And the most telling example of that shift in thinking organizationally, that I wish I had the slides of this because it was a big deal. But we used to have our big billboards that say, if you're an atheist, agnostic, non-believer, skeptic, don't know, nothing, deist, blah, 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 you could probably call yourself a humanist. Right? That was how we promoted ourselves. And now we have this big poster that says, if you believe in justice, equality, fairness, environmentalism, feminism, all these great positive values, welcome to your community. We don't mention God. We just say, this is what we stand for. That's one of the reasons why I say I'm not wedded to the term humanism. If that's not going to get people in the door, I'll go somewhere else. Like, those values are what I want to promote in my life, not humanism as an ideology, because I don't think we should be ideological about it, but those set of values that word represents. How do we do it? Radically change what we're doing as organizations. You know, I kind of feel like I'm way out on a limb here in comparison to most atheists I know. But I was a choir boy. Can anyone tell? Did you see the halo? I still have it. It's a little tarnished over time, but I still got it. I grew up as a choir boy singing in Sunday services, and I actually liked it. I liked the community. I liked the questions they raised. They talked about big questions in our Sunday services. I sang through so many masses. I liked the music. So my ideal community space would be kind of like, a little bit like, more like a sort of modern evangelical Christian space. Like really great music, lots of people having a good time, great kind of motivational talk about life's big questions, no God in it, like how do we live our lives, what the hell are we doing here on this planet, what's going on in science right now, what have we discovered, what's on the edge of the known that we're kind of rolling back. All accompanied to fantastic music, great visuals, video, kind of a Twitter feed going. Like I could see the whole thing in my head. It would look more like modern evangelical Christianity than anything else. And shall I tell you, people get horrified when I say this, but it works, right? They're full and we're not. And I kind of think that a rationalist movement, a movement that prides itself on kind of thinking, would take note of that, would say that whatever they're doing, they're managing to get hundreds of young people to come and sit through talks about 2,000-year-old nonsense. How do they do that? How is it that we often can't get hundreds of people to come to talk about the greatest human values which are actually true? It just boggles my mind. And I think it must be what the product we're offering is not appealing. So let's change the product radically. We have to find a way to make humanism sexy. It's why I dress up so well for these talks, Ian. You know, it's why I put on my tie. I never wear a tie at any other moment in my life. Right? Usually not even for these talks. This is special for you folks, Ian. This is special for the LA crowd, because I know you like good clothes. But I really feel like find a way to make it sexy, and we could have a huge movement on our hands. But right now we don't want this movement. We don't want this moment, this cultural moment, this huge demographic shift where people are saying traditional religion is not doing it for me, to go to waste. We don't want it to dissipate into nothing. We don't want them to be picked up by increasingly entrepreneurial religious organizations which are just going to change what they're doing and reach out again. They're doing it with the emerging church. They're doing it with all sorts of things to reach out to new people. It's very entrepreneurial. We've got to be better. We've got to play the game at their level. We need a whole ton of money to do it. Like that's another problem. We've got to fundraise. And we need to try things out, experiment with different products. We've got to be much more brave. And I really don't see a lot of the major movement organizations really understanding the cultural moment that they're at. Like the extraordinary possibility they have to make humanism the creed of the 21st century if they found a way to package it. But it's like a marketing problem, it's a branding problem. And I still haven't hit on it, but I feel like I'm getting closer. Like every time I speak in a community, I feel like people get it a bit more. And something, I don't know, I just don't have the answer to that question. If I had the answer, I would be running that organization. But I don't have it yet, nor have I finished my doctorate, so I should probably do that. But it's something about the product. It's not appealing. We need to change it, and we need to experiment. And I'm going to go around telling people to do this as much as I can, because it's going to be you folks who do it, right? It's because I go home, and you come back next week and either do the same thing, or you try something different and reach out to a new audience. So good luck. I hope I come back in a year and they can't get in the door. Seriously. Connor.
So I feel like my question is actually pretty similar to Ian's, but I stood up here, and it comes, I think it attacks the issue from a different angle, so I'm going to ask it. If you feel like you have something else to offer in response, then great. If not, move on to the next
I
one.
always have something. Whether it's cogent or not is another question.
So it's still addressing the idea, I think, of what we are trying to work toward in terms of a community. You've challenged us, and it's a challenge I'd like to take up, to be moral leaders for humanism, or for whatever the values are of humanism. Reason, compassion, led by hope. But there's a...
You get points for remembering those three, that's good. There's a test actually at the end.
There's a speaker and a writer named Simon Sinek. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, but he talks about what it takes to be a successful leader in promoting an idea.
Yes,
and
I watched a little TED talk of his recently.
Yes, and so his thesis very simply is you have to start from the why before you move on to the what and the how.
Right.
And I feel like we're at the why
with
your talk.
Yes.
And maybe not even yet to the why in terms of the movement as a whole. And the why maybe what's lacking in terms of marketing, making humanism sexy. But my question is, as somebody who does want to be a leader for these values, when do we start moving toward the what and the how and figuring that part out? I'm sure you're going to say that the Humanist Community Project is...
No, I'm going to say what do you mean when? Do it now. Like, do it now. We have one life to live on this planet, and mine is rapidly going. Like, I just turned 30. That's not old, but I feel it already. I still have lower back pain. No, it's creeping upon me. You know, I can see the spectre of death at my door, and it's coming for me. You know, Marcus Aurelius, in his meditations, wrote, he was one of the most influential people in the world, but he wrote, you know, none of those emperors who came before me are even talked about today, and that's going to be me soon. He said, sprint to the finish. He kept repeating that idea, sprint to the finish. He was very, very cognizant of the fact we have only one life. So firstly, now is when we do it. Right now. When I say now is the time to build it, I mean now. But I love the way you frame the question, because that's exactly what this talk is about. It's about why. And I don't think much of the movement has a good answer to that question yet. And that's why I do this talk, because I feel like it's very difficult to talk about my own work without sounding really self-important, but I really felt I had done a good job. When I spoke in the Ethical Culture Society of Boston, it was the first time I'd spoken there, and I gave a version of this talk, and someone at the end said, I've been coming to this group for 2 years, and only today do I understand why I'm going. That is exactly what I want to do with this talk. Then you actually have to do it. Right? When people are like, oh, so that's what this is all about, now let's do it. You can start now, but you have to start by, it's really difficult. Organizational development is difficult. But I do think it's a skill that can be learned and that we can do. It's perfectly possible, not just because Adler did it, but because people do it all the time. It's not uncommon to start successful values-based communities in this country. It's actually remarkably common. I went when I was in Colorado for a wonderful gay singing festival. It was the most cool thing you've ever seen, also the gayest thing you've ever seen. It was amazing. It was hundreds of gay people coming together to sing choruses at each other. It was amazing. And I spent some extra time there. Was it Colorado? Yeah, that's where Denver is, right? I spent some time there, and I went to Colorado Springs with a friend of mine to visit Ted Haggard's new church. Now, Ted Haggard, unless you've forgotten the wonderful story of Ted, was a megachurch pastor of a huge megachurch who was caught having sex with male prostitutes and doing crystal meth, probably at the same time. Probably he did the crystal meth off the male prostitute, I don't know. But he was thrown out of his megachurch. He was banished from Colorado State. He was literally told, if you come back to the state for a certain amount of time, you won't get your money from the church, so leave. And now he's back in Colorado Springs, the same city. He has another church in a big warehouse, about twice the size of this room, filled with people every Sunday, and I went to that service. If there's anyone you might expect not to be able to convince people to let him be a pastor of a church, it's someone who's still with his wife after being found having gay sex with a prostitute while doing crystal meth. He has a skill of organizational development. He's good at it. It's up to us to learn that skill, to put it into practice for our own benefits. It's learnable. It's not magic. It doesn't require God to do it, because, hey, he hardly talked about God either. It was a very, very interesting experience. He did, however, have a lot of really cute young guys, and I was very suspicious about how many cute young guys are around that congregation. But it certainly encouraged me to go back. But yeah, I feel like the time is now, and you're doing it. I mean, you are one of the people I'd hold up as one of these millennial generation people doing exactly what all the generational theorists are telling us that millennials are going to do, which is build new organizations. They tell me, if you believe this whole generational change theory, that we're the new civic generation, and we're actually interested in getting involved. We just haven't yet formulated exactly how we're going to do it, which is why the why is particularly important. But it will probably be new organizations, like Pathfinders, that blaze the trail.
Well, I suspect that service can draw people to humanism, to whatever community we're trying to build. And I understand what I'm trying to do with the service project and with launching the Humanist Service Corps.
Right.
But I still don't understand, even for myself, and I feel like you are only just even coming to grasp what the Humanist community or the Humanist communities of the future are going to be and how we're going to build.
Right.
And so that's the
Greg and I are writing a book about it right now.
When's that come out?
Hopefully, if we sign a deal soon, which it looks like we might, in a year or so.
Okay.
That's what we just promised.
That's my question.
Right, so, but really, it's going to be a lot of experiments. And I don't think it's going to be polls and asking people what they want, because I think often people don't have a clue what they want. Right? It's going to be trying out things and seeing what sticks. Just keep throwing things at the wall. And sometime, somewhere, someone's going to hit on some civic innovation that brings in non-religious people like nothing. Look at the London Assembly. London Assembly meets monthly in London with 2 comedians, full band. They meet to have a good time and discuss big ideas, basically. That's their deal. They call it the Atheist Church, right? Packed every time. Hundreds of people. They have to have a second service already because there's so many people. They hit on a way of doing it. It's about fun, it's about exuberance, it's not remotely like a religious service, it's kind of, well, except that of course it is like a really successful modern religious service, but let's just put that aside. It's not like what people imagine religion to be like when they really don't like it. So people will hit on successful models, and then we just need to promote them and push them. It's already happening. Hello.
Hi. I'm wondering, one of the things that, if I understand correctly, that you want to kind of not have, that Unitarianism has, is the kind of touchy-feely, new agey, uplift-oriented, non-reason-based part of things. You want something that is more reason-based, which,
right.
For many of us would be just fine. But what if for the majority of people, those are exactly the things that make it a community, that make it something more than just a lecture series, which they won't have a real tie to. They'll just go when they find it interesting and say no when they don't.
Right. So it's funny, because when you were speaking, I understand exactly what you meant. And I visited Unitarian communities and tried to join them, and I feel like this kind of slight sense of unease and even kind of ickiness about the palpable sense of schmaltz in the air, and the hint that maybe someone's just going to offer you crystal healing at any moment. And that's actually happened to me. So I can say it's literally happened to me in a Unitarian service. So I don't like that. I think that one of the things ideologically that I think is problematic about Unitarian Universalism is that sometimes it avoids taking a stand on inhumane, irrational beliefs. Because sometimes, reason is not an abstract value. It's something that we want to promote because it makes the world a better place. And if you're willing to overlook irrational beliefs, like, homeopathy, crystal healing, no big deal. No big deal until someone has cancer and they don't go to a doctor and they go to a homeopath, right? Then it really matters to that family and to that person. So I don't like the fact that they're willing to give a pass to certain things that I think are inhumane. I think that's a failure of compassion sometimes. And of course, all Unitarian communities are different. There are many of them, and they have different flavors, and there are many that I love, and I have a lot of respect for the Unitarian tradition. But it's really not for me. But on the other hand, I like moral intensity, and I like intense connections between people. I actually don't like being behind this podium. For me, I want my idiom to be here, right? I want to be with people. I like touching people. That's going to sound wrong to me. But you know what I mean? The sense of human connection that we get from being in fellowship with each other in a physical location, which you can't get on Facebook or on a blog comment. That's important to me. That's profoundly important to me. So I like the intensity that some of those communities can generate, the feeling that we're all here together for an important purpose. And that's what I want humanism to feel like. And
I guess there's something diffuse about some Unitarian communities that I've been visited in that doesn't quite have that intensity. So when you say touchy-feely, like it has a, I kind of want both less touchy-feely in a kind of diffuse way, but more of it in that intense way. And so I don't want this to be a lecture series. Far from it. I'm not envisaging a lecture series at all. I'm thinking about kind of a combination of TED Talk, which has this uplift element to it, like inspirational, exciting, you know, this is California, this is land of TED Talk, right? Uplift, inspirational, combination of that kind of plus this sort of hoedown, plus kind of, you know, good food and good company, and asking the big questions of human existence. Like, what on earth is my purpose on this profoundly confusing planet, this big rock spinning through space? Why on earth are we here? And what are we going to do with the time we have? That is something that I would really, really want to be a member of. Hey, partly this whole thing I'm doing here is majorly selfish, because I just want to exist in a community like the one that I have in my head, but it don't exist anywhere yet. So I'm going to go around convincing people to build them. So I can go, you know, in my later life, I can go and speak at them. So, yeah, I mean, does that remotely answer your question? Yeah. Okay, good. I don't know, I was just preaching remotely. Shall we make this the last one? Is anyone going to ask a question?
We should also, do we have the things to pass around while we have it?
Was there a hat?
We have two.
There's also a comments card, I noticed, in your program, and that's really helpful to them, I imagine, if you fill that out. So we just do that. Can someone play some more?
James, I've got a question for you. Political humanism, as opposed to just an ethical and morality part of humanism, and service side of it. Political humanism, actually engaging our politics as humanists. I mean, how would we go about that?
I have a whole post about this. Actually, more than one. Humanism is political in the small p sense of the word, in the sense that, in my view, it doesn't make much sense to say, yeah, we want to live in a country where no one starves and no child is homeless, but we're not political. That makes no sense to me. I mean, if you want that to happen, you have to engage in the political process. It's not going to happen otherwise, right? You have to support certain candidates, not support certain other candidates. But I think it's better for humanism to remain not party political, not committed to any political ideology, because we are very committed as humanists to fallibilism. As part of our reason commitment is the idea we could be wrong. And I think one of the problems with political ideologies, that's why I'm really hesitant even to say I'm a liberal or something like that, is that if my political views become part of my identity, I might be less willing to change them if it looks like they're not working out. I actually think politics is a really difficult area for humanists because we don't know what the effect of certain policies are going to be. Like, if we're honest, we can have a big debate. I heard on NPR recently, they had on what's it called, the debate program, Intelligence Squared debate on should we abolish the minimum wage? Right? My instinct says no, hell no, it's a bad idea. But there are economic arguments that these people put forward as to why it would be better for poor people to abolish the minimum wage, right? And if I'm honest, I don't know. I don't actually know what would happen if we abolished the minimum wage, so we have to make a judgment call. And a lot of political issues are like that. You're going to have people on one side of the issue for what sound like good reasons, and on the other side of the issue for what sound like good reasons. Many political issues are not like that. Like gay marriage is not like that. You know, if you don't support fundamental equality of all people under the law, you are a humanist, you can go away. So that's easy. But a lot of our political issues are much more complicated, like climate change. What is the best way to try and help prevent climate change? Like invest tons of money in researching renewable energy, or build tons of nuclear power plants, which don't cause the same sort of emissions, right? It might be a shorter-term solution. We might need to do both. Like, what do we do about that? I don't know anyone can give you an answer to that question that's definitive, that will be totally rational and convincing. So we've got to be careful about politics. We can't make it so that, oh, you are this sort of politics, you can't be a member of our movement. So I think that there are ways of justifying many different political positions on many of the pressing issues of our age, which are consonant with the humanist values. And yet there are others which are not possibly consonant with human values. You don't think women, you know, should have equal rights or something like that, then you know, it's not consonant with the idea of equal dignity. So it's really complicated. And I think you have to take it issue by issue. You think each one through, you discuss it, and then you see whether you can support doing something as a community. But I have to say, right now, there's going to be nothing that's going to stop this thing getting off the ground more than being really involved in party politics. So right now, I think let's be true to the fact that our aims are small p political, not delve deeply into party politics. That's a good idea. Okay, last question, James.
Okay, so thank you. So we've seen in the last century, 50 years, several decades, we've seen the number of atheists and humanists increase, right? The people with no religion.
People with no religion, yeah.
Yet, as you pointed out, the ethical culture society sits nearly empty.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of something that we can't overlook. I mean, there was also a time when a lot of Unitarian congregations, including this one, used to be much more strictly humanist.
Yeah.
And less sort of warm and fuzzy, and less language of reverence and devotion, and language of the sacred, and ethical culture once thrived where now most people have never heard of it. So, is it worth asking, what did they do wrong?
Yeah, that's a great question. I ask that myself all the time, especially now I've kind of hitched some part of my wagon, some part of my professional life to ethical culture, which is not that healthy a movement in many societies, if we're really honest about it. It makes a lot of sense to ask what they did wrong. And I think that the example, for instance, of ethical culture and of humanistic Unitarian congregations, many of them moving slightly back towards the theistic end of the spectrum, as I hear from my Unitarian friends, is why isn't this working? If this is such a great idea, why isn't it working? I'm glad we ended on this question, because that's the really critical, skeptical question, which is like, yeah, if people wanted this, they've got models out there, and they ain't going, so, hey. And the only answer I can give to that question, ultimately, is, firstly, congregational life is still remarkably healthy in this country. Tons of people, I can take this guy, tons of people want to be a part of some sort of congregational community. That's clear, because Ted Haggard can go back to Colorado Springs, open up a church, and suddenly has 300 people in a year, right? People want something like that. So it's not that social media has killed the congregation entirely. Like everyone gets their interaction on Facebook and they never need to see each other again. People still want something of that. And I think the answer is, one of the things they did wrong is they didn't change with the times. A lot of the elements that make up a platform address in some of the ethical culture societies I've visited are the same as they were 140 years ago, fundamentally. And that's not a recipe for organizational success, to put it mildly. Okay, so they haven't changed with the times. And there may be a fundamental problem in a movement of which one of its founding principles is this strong commitment to reason and rationalism, which is this kind of sense of what you might call sort of thought paralysis, whereby you kind of overthink everything, because there's always a counter-argument to every proposal, and so actually doing stuff becomes very, very difficult. And I really think the humanist movement really suffers from that. Adler, there's a great part, Adler, who founded ethical culture, was a member of something called the Free Religious Association, which was an association of liberal religious leaders of his time. And in one of his biographies, there's this great quote which says that the sort of the endless philosophizing of the Free Religious Association left the impatient young Adler hungering for a movement that would speculate less and labor more. And there is a sort of element to which we love to debate endlessly what might be possible, or what is ethical, but not really do anything about it. Like I have in another talk, I say that there's something of the armchair philosophy about humanism, or I think, particularly sort of the American form of humanism, which is promoted by the major organizations, whereby people go to meetings and they discuss how, in principle, one should live one's life. And they come to a consensus, and they come with magnificent documents that express that consensus, manifestos of humanist thought. And then they go home, sit in their armchair, and their work is done. They've discovered how to live a good life. But of course, as the great philosopher said, there's a difference between knowing the good and loving the good. Right? There's a big difference between knowing what it is to live an ethical life and actually living one. And as a movement, we haven't found ways to galvanize people to live out their values so much as we found ways to have venues to talk about them. And we really need to find ways to overcome that. But you're right, we should look at what we've done wrong in the past. We should be really honest about it and non-defensive about it, because we've got a lot to learn from our own mistakes. And that, I think, is in the highest tradition of humanism and one of the highest values of human beings, and looking at the parts of our past where we have failed and striving as ever to do better next time. And on that profoundly humanistic note, let's end with a benediction. What should we say? Cheese and wine is available in the whatever that room is. So thank you everyone.